Hey everyone, it's Smita. Today we are going to be talking about 3 upcoming indie makeup releases. I've got the Glaminatrix Old Soul palette, a palette from a new to me brand called Ladybug Glow, and 10 single shadows from Terra Moons. I'm going to show you some detailed swatches, multiple looks with each collection, and have some wrap-up thoughts. So let's go ahead and get into it. I do have a discount affiliate code with each brand, and it's the same code, so I'm going to go ahead and pop it up on the screen now. The palette in my hands is Glaminatrix Old Soul. This is part of a new series that they're doing called the Archetype Collection. At the time that I'm making this video, I actually have not seen a price for this palette. I'm going to assume it's around the $60 to $65 price point in US dollars, and a discount code will knock off 10%. The Old Soul palette has 15 pans, with 7 being shimmer and 8 being matte. And in my opinion, this is exactly the type of palette that Glaminatrix is really known for, which is a really kind of punchy neutrals with a twist. I've come to know that when it comes to the shimmers in Glaminatrix palettes, they're going to pack a punch. They're going to be sparkly. A lot of them are going to have multicolored sparkles. And even the metallics and the regular shimmers are special. And I may have forgotten to mention this, but Glaminatrix is an Australian indie brand. In the second set of shimmers here, we have some deeper tones. The vibes I'm getting from this palette are sultry and smoky, but I'm also getting day-to-day friendly. When it comes to their matte formula, I find it to be easy to work with. They're definitely on the more pigmented side right out of the gate, like they're not as buildable as some of the other mattes that I've come to use. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just that if you're a beginner to eyeshadow, it's just something to keep in mind because you're going to get a lot more pigment right away than some other matte formulas. And here is what the whole palette looks like swatched to my arm. Just from looking at the palette, you can tell that it's easy to come up with some simple combinations of mattes, like you have 2 that are kind of pinky purple, you have a gray and a black, a lighter brown and a richer brown, and you have a nice range of shimmers from lighter to deeper. All right, and we are going to start off by dipping into the Glaminatrix palette. I'm going to keep my looks pretty simple because I want the shimmers to be the star of the show. And I want to do a cool tone look first. So I'm going to start off with this gray matte and just dust it all over the lid. And these mattes, even on first touch, felt so incredibly pigmented. Like, this is just one dip into the pan. You do have to kind of go in with a bit of a light hand because a little bit goes a long way. Then I'm just dusting a little bit of that same gray matte along the lower lash line. In the outer corner, I'm going to use that same brush and pick up just a little bit of this black matte. I know it's going to be super pigmented. I have to go in with a super light hand. And now I'm just going to prime the lid with a little bit of the Clionadh Shimmer Enhancer. And then I am going to take this gorgeous shade Whisper, just show you again what it looks like on my fingertip and the back of my hand here. It is kind of like an iridescent, but I feel like you can build it up for a little bit more opacity. And just put that all over the lid. And then I'm just going to put the tiniest amount on the brow bone and on the inner corner. Now, I did get some fallout with that shade, so I would recommend, if you can, do your base first, but I wanted to focus on eyes here. So I added some liner and mascara, and here is the first completed look. Okay, for my second look, I want to dip into some of the pink shades. For my transition shade, I'm going to use Kindred and put that all over the lid. Again, super pigmented, easy to blend, but go in with the light hand. In that same shade along the lower lash line. And then in the inner corner, I'm going to use this shade Echo. That is a really lovely deep plummy matte, also very easy to work with. And then just connecting that to the lower lash line. I added my shimmer primer, and then I think for this look, it's so hard to pick a shimmer, but I'm gonna go in with the shade Timekeeper. Here is what it looks like on my fingertip, and then I'll swatch it on the back of my hand. This is Timekeeper. And I'm just gonna use this as my all over lid shade. I feel like this palette really does lend itself to some easy kind of 2 and 3 shadow looks, because as you can see, like these two shades, these two matte shades pair really well together. You have this shade, which is a lighter brown, and then you have a deeper brown that you could use as a deepening up shade, and then a gray and a black. So I feel like from the standpoint of being very intuitive to use for easy everyday looks, this is a great palette. Here is the second completed look. Okay, so wrapping up with some thoughts about Old Soul. This is the newest palette that will be launching from Glaminatrix. It's actually been a little while since we got a palette from Glaminatrix, and when I think about the brand, I think about palettes that excel in neutrals with a twist. And I feel like this is a great neutrals with a twist. This is a part of a series. It's the first part of what is called the Archetype series. So we're going to see more palettes in this series. And, you know, I feel like this palette is a very kind of intuitive one to use when it comes to doing, you know, easy 2 to 3 shadow looks, everyday looks, but with, you know, a lot of glam to them. So what I mean by that is that I feel like, you know, these two mattes pair really well together. Obviously you can do other combinations, but I feel like in terms of, you know, intuitive shades that are easy to use together, these two, the gray, the black, you have a deep brown, you have a more kind of mid-toned brown, and, you know, different permutations. I feel like, you know, with the looks that you create, giving one of these shimmers just a place to shine, because these shimmers are so incredibly sparkly and dimensional, and your look is going to be special kind of no matter which one that you use on the lids. I only used these two shimmers, and I feel like, you know, I got a lot of drama from these, and I really like them. I feel like you could do something a little bit more day-to-day friendly, but this to me is actually a really glam palette. I quite enjoyed using it, and it is definitely one that I see myself getting a lot of day-to-day use out of. As I mentioned before, you are going to get fallout with these shimmers. I highly recommend doing your base first. And, you know, the other critique that I'm going to make is I still do hope to see some more colorful palettes from Glaminatrix. We've gotten a lot of more neutral leaning palettes. Of course, we have some that have sort of what I would consider a pop of color, but I love some of the colorful palettes that Glaminatrix used to do, so I do hope to continue to see more colorful palettes from the brand in general. Things I might have changed about the palette is, you know, these two mattes are pretty similar. I probably would have had something a little bit different in tone. And then this cream matte, I'm sure I'll think of a use for it, but I'm not really, you know, it's not coming to mind exactly how I'm going to use this shade. When it comes to the shimmers, I wouldn't change anything about them. I think they are so special. And these would also be really, really beautiful one and done shades. All right, the next palette that I have is from a new to me brand, and this is called Ladybug Glow. Ladybug Glow actually isn't a new brand, but they're new to me. They sell on Etsy and Gourmande Girls, and I believe they're also working on their own site. This is called the Floresta Inferno palette, and let's look at the inside, because you know, if you've been following me for a little while, I love blue and purple eyeshadow. So I am excited to dip into this one. This has 10 pans, You've got 6 mattes and 4 shimmers. And I gotta say that from looking at these pans of the shimmers, I can't tell how they're gonna look. 3 out of the 4 of them have a kind of marbled, multicolored appearance in the pan, so I'm very intrigued. Aesthetically, very pretty to look at. My interest is piqued, and I think that this formula might be the same formula that Gourmande Girls uses as well. So if you are familiar with Gourmande Girls and like that formula, I believe that this may be the same formula. I could be wrong about that, but I think so. Right off the bat, these shimmers are definitely very sparkly. A few of them look like they have multicolored sparkles. 2 of them are deeper and kind of purpley leaning, and then the 2 lighter ones are more green leaning. And here's what the whole palette looks like swatched on my arm. I'm very excited for doing some blue and purple looks, so let's go ahead and get into it. I'm gonna dip into this pastel purple matte here and just use it on the inner portion of the lid. I'm gonna go for, pair this with the cobalt matte in more the outer portion, but so far so good. I love a pastel that pops and is easy to work with, which is not always the case. And I did use a little bit of the About Face primer before I went in with eyeshadow, but that's it. And then I'm just putting a little bit of that same pastel matte along the lower lash line on the inner portion. Right, and now we're gonna go into Inferno. By the way, I said Floresta Inferno, but it's Inferno. So just gonna take a little bit. This is gonna be super pigmented. Ooh, that is so pretty though, the combination of those 2 mattes together. I'm just winging it out ever so slightly. I'm definitely finding this formula to be quite buildable, and even though I don't have a lighter matte out here, the edges don't look harsh. Now I'm just gonna connect it down to the lower lash line. I actually feel like you could have a look with just these 2 shadows and it would be so pretty, but I really want to dip into these shimmers because it looks to me like we have some special shimmers in this palette. What do I want to use? I think I'm going to use Flora, which looks like a shade that has multicolored sparkles, and I think it's going to be really pretty with these 2 mattes. It looks kind of almost like greenish, but I feel like it pairs really well with these shades. And then I'm going to take that same shimmer and put it on the inner corner and the brow bone. All right, I added some liner and mascara, and here is the first completed look. All right, for my second look, I want to use some of the other shades in the palette. I'm going to start off with this shade Frigid and try to use a light hand because I just want to use it as a transition shade. I'm finding that these mattes are buildable, which especially with colorful mattes is helpful. Like with that cobalt matte I used in my last look, if that had been super pigmented out of the gate, it would have been harder to work with. All right, now I'm gonna go in with this deep kind of blue purple matte called Mulberry and just use that to create a halo eye. Taking a little bit and deepening up the outer corner. And then just adding a little bit to those same areas in the lower lash line. For my lid shade, I'm going to dip into Frosty, which is another kind of lighter shade that has multicolored sparkles. Here is what it looks like swatched on the back of my hand. And I'm going to put that into the center of the lid. And then I'm just going to add that same shimmer to the lower lash line. And then I'm just going to use this same shade Frosty as a brow bone highlight and an inner corner highlight. And by the way, these are the two shimmers that I didn't use in my looks. These are like deeper shimmers. Both have multicolored sparkles, especially this one is kind of like a deep blue purple with green sparkle, and then this one is more of a deep purple metallic with a little bit of a pink shift. Here is my second completed look. All right, some wrap-up thoughts on the Floresta Inferno palette. So as I mentioned, this is my first time trying a palette from Ladybug Glow. I have another one that's more like grungy greens that I received as well, so I'll definitely include that in a different video, or at least a short or something like that. So these are definitely my tones. I love blues and purples, so I had a lot of fun using this palette and creating the looks that I used this palette for, the two looks. In terms of the formula, super easy to work with. I don't have any complaints about that whatsoever. I thought the shimmers packed a lot of punch. If I could have changed maybe just a couple things about the palette, I really love that we had this pastel in here, because I love being able to create looks that have contrast between lighter mattes and deeper mattes. Would have loved to maybe have one more lighter matte. I feel like that would have maybe facilitated even more looks, you know, the type of looks that I go for. And then the other thing is, I think that I would have changed, you know, these two shimmers that I used, this shimmer and this shimmer, are both beautiful, but they ended up looking pretty similar on the lid. I would have loved to have, in addition to, or instead of one of these shimmers, to have a shimmer that was kind of like a lighter blue or purple, just because we have a lot of blue and purple tones in here. And I think, you know, these deeper shimmers work very well for that, but it would have been really nice to have a lighter shimmer that was like blue or purple. But I am really excited for this brand and excited to see what else they're going to do in the future. Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk about the release that's coming from Terra Moons. We have a collection of 12 single shadows, and these are available individually. So you purchase them individually. You may be able to purchase them as a bundle, but you have 4 mattes and 8 shimmers. First, we have the shade M42, and this is a super sparkly version of a green-brown duochrome, and I absolutely love these kind of shades, so I was immediately drawn to this one. It's a perfect neutrals with a twist. If you like that type of shade, then you're really gonna like this shade. Next, we have the shade Ring Nebula. This has a peachy coral base that's pale and a strong golden green shift. It's very sparkly and it still feels quite smooth. This one I would say isn't quite as sparkly as M42, but it's still very sparkly. This is definitely the type of texture that I think will work for a lot of people. Next, we have Mintaka. I would say this one is the most textured out of all of the shades in this collection. It's very pretty. It has a pale kind of blue base, and it shifts green, gold, pink. If you like a shade like the Cosmos, I think you would like this shade. I think it has a little bit more silver to it, and it's not quite as shifty as the Cosmos. But I really like it because it kind of stays looking blue. A lot of chromes like this do change because they're so shifty. Next, we have the shade Drift Light, and this has what I would describe as a pale lavender base, and it shifts gold and green and orange. Again, it has a very smooth texture, but is still quite sparkly and very shifty. I think that this formula from Terra Moons is exquisite, and I love the fact that it's going to work for a lot of people in terms of its texture. Next, we have the shade Ravati, and this I would say is the second most textured shade in the bunch. It's a very beautiful glowy blue purple, and you know how much I love shades like this, so this is definitely one of my favorite shades in this collection. Next, we have the shade Artemis 2, and this is also a very glowy blue purple. It's not as sheer as Ravati, but it does have quite a bit less texture. This is another favorite of mine because, again, I love blue purple shades in general. Okay, next we have the shade Heart Nebula. This has a really pretty kind of pinky purple base and a strong fiery shift, gold and orange and red. Since posting my short not too long ago, I've already heard that this is a crowd favorite. Okay, last but not least, we have the shade Echo Pulse. I already know this is going to be a crowd favorite as well because it's deep and moody. I would describe this one as a deep purple with a hint of blue, and it has a green shift. It also has multicolored sparkles. And this shade is also one of my favorites. Here is what all of the shades look like swatched in the back of my hand. I actually filmed 2 looks, but I won't be able to show them because my microphone was off. So hopefully the eye swatches will help. I'm happy to say that I had a really easy time using the mattes, so that's good news. I feel like the matte formula is improving over time, so I'm very happy to see that. If you're not familiar to Terra Moons, these are all sold as single shadows. So if you have a couple of favorites, you can just pick up those. And I believe that they are going to have a bundle available as well. I don't know how much that will be. So yeah, I've been using Terra Moons for years. They're actually the first indie eyeshadow brand that I ever tried, and I'm very happy to say that this is a beautiful collection. I don't think that you'll be disappointed if you try anything from this collection. All right, I feel like we covered quite a bit of ground in this video. We talked about Ladybug Glow, Glaminatrix, and Terra Moons. I would love to hear what you think of these 3 launches and what you think of this format of video. This is like my second time doing a video where I talk about multiple palettes or collections in one video. So would love to know what you think of doing the detailed swatches and multiple looks. As always, I really hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.